everyone. Today I will be narrating the story of Puss in Boots. So it starts with the setting of an old man who is on his deathbed and he is surrounded with his three sons. Now while he is dying, he has to give his responsibilities to his sons. So he gives the eldest son, who is the most responsible one, a grain mill. For the second, the middle son, he gives the mules because he was very hardworking. Now because the sons got large amounts of properties, they were very happy with it. But the third son, he was a very humble and simple boy. So the father said that he had nothing left but a pet cat to give him. And while he said his last few words, he passed away. So Jack, the third son's name was Jack, and he left the town with the cat with a small bag that has its necessities. He was very worried and anxious that how will he earn his living or how will he live just on a pet cat. So he asked the cat that, "What am I going to do with you?" asked Jack, looking sadly at the cat. "My brothers will earn money from the mill and the mules, but what will I do with you? You may be able to catch mice for yourself, but I'll certainly die of hunger." "Don't worry, master," the cat spoke suddenly. "I'll make sure we live like royalty. Just give me a pair of boots and give me your string bag." So the Puss, he spoke suddenly that, "You don't need to worry, master, because I will make sure that we live like royal people. And for that, you just give me a pair of boots for me to wear and give me a string bag that has its necessities." Now because the cat started to speak, Jack was very surprised at when his cat started speaking. So, "Well, I don't have anything much to lose," he sighed and spent whatever little money he had. Now because Jack was very carefree that because he didn't have any money to lose, nothing much to lose because his father had just given him a cat, so he had a very little money that he had stored for a rainy day. So he spent that on buying boots for Puss and also gave him his string bag. Well, Mr. Puss in Boots. Even if I am not penniless, that means I don't have any money, you still look very smart in those boots." So Jack was very impressed by the appearance of Puss in his boots. Now, the cat bowed because he was being appreciated by his master, and he took off the forest nearby with the string bag. What he did was that he stole some carrots and he also stole some cheese from a nearby kitchen that was there of some people that lived, and he brought those and he used them as a bait. That means he used them to catch the rabbits in the burrow that lived in the forest, and he caught those rabbits in a bag and took them to the king's palace. Now there were guards, of course, but they did not stop the cat because they were so impressed by his magnificence in his boots that they allowed him inside the king's palace. Even the king was very shocked to see a cat in boots standing with his bag on and in his coat. So the king was also very surprised at the cat's look. "Greetings, your majesty," he said, going low. "My lord, Marquis of Carabas, sends his humble gift and his deepest regards for you and the queen." So now Puss came with the bag of rabbits to the king, and he greeted him and made a fake name, Marquis of Carabas, and told him that he was the master and gave those rabbits as a present to the king and queen. So the king's cooks, they cooked those rabbits, and this also sent a very large amount of portion for as the king's thanks for Puss and his master. So then Jack and Puss, they feed it on a very wonderful meal, and Jack also thanked Puss because he had never eaten so well and so much. So Puss just smiled and he curled up to sleep. Cozily, the cat went to sleep. Then from that day onwards, Puss would go to the forest, he would collect those rabbits, and then he would go to the king's palace, present them as the gifts from Marquis of Carabas, and the king would get it cooked and send it back as a generous proportion. From that day onwards, Jack never went hungry. Because Puss had promised him that they will live like royalty, first step was that they will eat like royals. So from that day onwards, Jack never went hungry. So because they were impressed by the Puss' regular gifts, that brought everybody in wonder that who is the Marquis of Carabas, because Puss had never given any details. He just gave the name, the present, and went back with the proportion from the meal that was cooked. But he never gave any details that from where was he, or what kingdom was his, or what extent was his kingdom of, what kind of people were there, nothing. So they all thought that he must be a very noble at the very least. When the king started to ask Puss to introduce him again and again, because he thought that he was a very nice person who sends him gifts every day, so he wanted to meet such a noble person. So he used to ask him to introduce him again and again, and then Puss decided to do that. So he would again cook up a very intelligent meal and start on with a plan to introduce his real master to the king. Now, what was the conflict that was coming in the middle of the story? Puss couldn't have taken Jack to the king's palace and introduced him as his master in the tatters that he wore. That means in the torn clothes that he wore, because he had no money, no property, just a cat. So he didn't have very good clothes. So he couldn't introduce the king of Carabas to another king in the tatters that Jack wore. But Puss was never short of ideas. He found out the king's schedule and persuaded Jack to bathe in the river on the day that he knew the king's carriage would pass by. He asked Jack to take off all his clothes and stand in the river neck deep. That means in the river, he should stand till there where only his face and neck is visible. Rest everything is covered in water. Jack was surprised of the condition that Puss was posing in front of him, but he had started trusting the intelligent cat. So he still asked for confirmation that you do know what you're doing, asked Jack, as he stood shivering in the icy water. Yes, Puss replied confidently. He was very confident that he will be living in the palace with Jack. So he said that we are on the way of our new home in the palace. So Puss hid all Jack's clothes under his rock, and when the king's carriage appeared, he came in the middle of the road and he started shouting loudly, "Oh help! Oh help! My lord, the Marquis of Carabas, was swimming in the river and somebody stole all his clothes. Oh, somebody do something!" So because the king recognized Puss because he was bringing every day those rabbits, so that's why he sent his man to bring some warm and royal clothes for Marquis of Carabas. Then, when the clothes came, Jack wore them, and oh wow, he looked so handsome that he looked like a real prince. He was very tall and handsome in his royal clothes, and he did look like a prince. So, he looked so wonderful that the king invited him to accompany him with the princess. Now the king was very impressed by his good looks, his generous gestures that he used to do when he sent the gifts. He was very impressed by Jack, and he invited him to the dinner with the princess. Now Jack, he was very happy to agree a very royal dinner invitation by a very noble king. So he agreed and they climbed in the royal carriage. So Puss, he rushed to the coachman and he said, and he gave him directions to Marquis's castle. So he made up the directions to actually a giant's castle there lived a giant or an ogre, and he gave him directions to his castle and told him that these were the directions to Marquis's castle, and he ran ahead. Now first he came across some farmers, and he told the farmers that if anyone asked him, they tell them that these lands belong to the Marquis. Now the farmers, they were very pleased by the cute little cat's appearance, so they laughed and said that okay fine, we'll do that. Then Puss found some laborers and asked them to say the same thing. They also agreed. When he came to his destination, the castle of the ogre, that means the castle of the giant, he stood in front of the grand castle and knocked loudly. The ogre himself opened the gates and called the cat in. But he didn't say anything and he was laughing secretly, seeing a serious looking cat in boots. So he became very sarcastic and he said that, "Oh wow, you're so beautiful." Because he was very secretly was laughing because he was very astonished by the presence of a serious looking cat and he was standing in his boots. Now, this giant or ogre was famous for his ability to turn into anything. He could take the shape of any animal. And Puss knew this. So he also knew that how much this ogre loved flattery. That means if anyone would praise the ogre, he would adore that flattery. So Puss buttered him, that means he started praising him very much until the ogre was very happy, and then he asked, "Oh great ogre, is it true that you can turn into any animal?" "Yes, my dear," because the ogre was very impressed because he was being flattered, he was being buttered by a cat, so he was very nice to the cat and he said that, "Yes, my dear." The ogre smiled. "I don't quite believe that you can change into any animal," Puss said innocently. "Oh, all right," laughed the ogre. "I'll show you. Well, which animal should I turn into?" So Puss said that, "Anything you wish." Then, the next instant, there was a big, great lion that was standing in front of Puss. He jumped straight out of the window because Puss was very scared of lions. Now, laughing loudly, ogre changed back to his own original shape. "Oh, come on in, Puss." He was very happy with Puss because he was being flattered so much. He was being nice to him. Now, "Ooh, you're good. That means you really feel like a real animal." And he wiped his forehead because he was very scared. So sweat was coming off. He wiped his forehead. But you know, changing into a big animal is not a very difficult deal. But I can bet that you can't change in a small animal, like mouse, for instance. Can't I? Now, the ogre was a very competitive person. So he was like, "Oh, you think I cannot do that? I will show you how is it done. Watch." The ogre fell straight into Puss's trap and changed himself into a mouse. Now, because cats love eating mice, so he said that you can't change into a mouse. He knew how competitive he was, and the ogre changed into a mouse, and Puss gobbled and pounced on the mouse, and he gobbled him up. The moment he did that, the enchantment of the castle broke. The spell that was the castle was bewitched under by the ogre that broke, and all the people the ogre had imprisoned, changed into different animals, came back to their original shapes. Now, because the ogre had put a enchantment spell on the people that were there, they turned into animals. But because he had eaten, the ogre was destroyed. Because of that, they had turned back into people. They were so grateful, they were so happy that Puss had saved them, that they instantly agreed to tell the king that this was the castle that belonged to the Marquis of Carabas / Jack. Now, meanwhile, the king's coachmen, they followed the way that the cat told him, and when they came to the lush fields, the king said that whom these fields belong to. And because the Puss had already made an arrangement with those farmers, the farmers said that these fields belong to Marquis of Carabas. And now he was very impressed that so many large fields belong to Marquis of Carabas. Then they came across those laborers and they said the same thing. Again, the king was very impressed. And he was impressed that the Marquis of Carabas was not only handsome, he was polite also. And he was very wealthy also. Now, His wonder was 100-fold when they finally came to the grand castle and he was informed that this too belonged to the Marquis of Carabas. Then and there, the king said to Jack that, "Will you marry my daughter?" Jack had sat amazed all this while and blessed Puss with all his heart. An old farmer's son who had just got a cat in his property was now the owner of such a large castle, a very intelligent cat, and the heir to one more kingdom's throne because he would marry the daughter of that king. He thanked and blessed Puss with all his heart. So when he heard the king's offer and took a look at the blushing princess by his side, he agreed immediately. What a great celebration was there and the entire land was prepared for the wedding because it was the wedding of the next heir to the throne. Jack gifted Puss another pair of boots that were very fancy and they made up of shining brown leather lined with red fur. They were very magnificent boots. And with that, he also bought an equally magnificent hat with red feather on top of it and a little sword that was in a red velvet scabbard. Oh, how grand Puss looked in his fury. "I did promise you, didn't I, that we will live like royalty?" So Puss completed and kept his promise, and he whispered this to Jack, and then he curled up in his silk basket. This was the story of Puss in Boots. I hope you understood this well and it was very interesting. Thank you.